Welcome to Must See IMDB, a podcast where we break down IMDb's #1 top-rated episode of a classic TV show and then discuss, did the IMDb voters do the show justice? Or are there hidden gem episodes that need a boost up the list? I'm Abby.
And I'm Katie.
You may notice our voices sound exactly alike because we're twins.
And as twins, we have a shared love of TV that remains all the way through to today. We watch, we discuss, and now we're discussing with you.
So let's get started with today's episode. We are very excited about this one because it is a show that I know both of us have seen absolutely every episode of, and probably multiple times watched the entire series. Today, we're talking about the Golden Girls.
4 women, our beloved Rose, Dorothy, Sophia, and Blanche, who paved the way for modern television all the way back in the 1980s.
Yeah, so this classic show began in 1985. And now it's time to reveal what IMDb says is the best episode of the entire series. And the voters of IMDb chose the series finale, which was a 2-part episode. It was called One Flew Out of the Cuckoo's Nest, and it's season 7, episode 23. So that is what we are here to discuss today. All right, Katie, tell us about part 1 of the episode.
Okay, so part 1 begins with that theme song that is one of the most famous theme songs on television. The song always makes me feel immediately de-stressed. There's almost, endorphins going off in my brain. It's like a cup of tea. The song is called Thank You for Being a Friend. It is sung by, in the industry, apparently she was a well-known jingle singer. Her name is Cynthia Fee. She sang the song, but I never knew that this was a song that was actually a top 20 hit back in 1978, before it ever became a show jingle. It was written by Andrew Gold, and I found this out on a lonely little road listening to the radio one night when it came on, and I was about 10 seconds in when I thought, what is this? Because some man is singing my Golden Girls song. Thank you for being a friend. But no. In 1978, Andrew Gold hit number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 with this tune. He later called it a throwaway song that it took him less than an hour to write. But Cynthia Fee brought it to its main fame as the theme song to the Golden Girls. I did a deep dive on this. The original producers did not want this to be the song. They were going after Bette Midler's song Friends. But you got to have friends. However, that song was way too expensive to get the rights to. And apparently a crew member remembered this song. And when they checked in on this one, the rights were much cheaper. So they all sort of jumped at it and took this as their jingle. Andrew Gold, who wrote and sung the song originally, is the son of Marni Nixon, who was the ghost singer of Hollywood back in the day. She was sort of the person who would do all of the singing in major musicals for actresses who could not sing. So, for example, in The King and I, she sang for Deborah Kerr. She sang for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. And then famously in West Side Story, she sung for Maria for Natalie Wood. Unfortunately, they did not inform Natalie Wood that her voice would not be used. So she was quite shocked when the movie came out and she was not singing on it, and it led to a big scandal. So yeah, Andrew Gold is her son, and he was the originator of this lovely tune that I enjoy to this day.
I love that history. I didn't know any of that, but I totally agree with you. I'm sipping my tea while you're explaining this song, because even if I'm watching 5 episodes in a row, I never skip the intro.
It's just like a bubble bath.
Yeah, it lowers my blood pressure for sure.
Also, the house, that lovely thing that we see in literally the beginning of every episode, that house is not located in Miami. It's located in LA. In fact, if anyone wants to go visit, it's at 245 North Saltaire Avenue. Unfortunately, it now has a high privacy wall all the way around it, so you can't really see in. It's 2,900 square feet. Appropriately, it has 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and is currently valued at $3 million.
Wow. Blanche is rolling in at a little more than we knew. So we've had our blood pressure lowered. We've taken our sip of tea. Tell us how this episode kicks off.
Okay, so we kick off in the famous Golden Girls kitchen. We have Sophia and Rose sitting at the kitchen table. Abby, I think in one of our previous episodes that featured Rue McClanahan as a minor character, you talked about how she's good at business. Well, she was not the only Golden Girl who was good at business, because these women carry off 11 seconds of silence with great facial expressions and 0 dialogue. But soon we're interrupted by Blanche, who breezes into the kitchen. She has a major dilemma on her hands because she has met someone in the produce aisle at the supermarket and she wants to go to play tennis with him. But alas, her father's little brother is coming into town and she's expected to spend time with him as well. So she needs to dump Uncle Lucas off on somebody so that she can go out with her tennis partner. So eventually she pounces on Dorothy, who is not excited about the idea of who she think will be some hick from the backwoods. When Blanche says to her, "But he's a man of cultivation and high taste," she says, "Oh, yes. And I'm sure he wipes the jug on his sleeve before he passes it." So she's really not into this, but Blanche lays it on thick with how much Uncle Lucius has been dying to meet her. And eventually, Dorothy caves and gets stuck on a blind date with Uncle Lucas. So, of course, you know me, I have to do my deep dive on blind dates. That's actually how I met my husband. So I found this interesting survey from something called datingadvice.com that did a survey last year. And they found 43% of Americans have gone on a blind date. LGBT respondents were 16% more likely than heterosexual respondents to have gone on a blind date. You would think that probably the most popular age group would be the younger crowd, but that's actually not true. The age group most likely to have been on a blind date is the 65 plus crowd. And apparently all of these dating sites are learning that the 50 plus crowd is really like the next place where all this online dating is going to happen. In keeping with this episode, of all the regions in the US, the South is the most likely to have gone on a blind date at 45%.
Well, then Uncle Lucas is right there in your demographic.
Yes. So we transfer to Dawn's Crab House, where we meet Dorothy and some handsome gentlemen sitting in yet another awkward silence. This one's 13 seconds long, but these are 2 old pros because we have B. Arthur as Dorothy, obviously, and they have cast Leslie Nielsen as Uncle Lucas. Now, I don't know if folks are familiar, but Leslie Nielsen is a famous comedy actor from the 1980s, most well known for doing comedy spoof. So, for example, he was in Airplane. He was the lead in all of the Naked Gun franchise episodes. But I have to say, I was shocked by how good he was in this episode. He had this twinkle that carried this character so far in such a short amount of time. Eventually, the 2 characters figure out that Blanche has completely over-exaggerated their interest in each other, and they decide to get revenge. And their version of revenge is to fake proposed marriage she's going to accept, and that's essentially how they're going to get back at Blanche, by pretending to be madly in love.
I'd like to just point out that this trope is a popular one in romance novels, but I love it. Keep going.
So I had only ever experienced Leslie Nielsen as this over-the-top sort of ridiculous actor, but he's a great sort of balance to Dorothy's sarcasm. When they're still kind of in the awkward part of the date, she sarcastically tells him that he's joking, and then he kind of smiles devilishly at her and says, "Well, somebody has to." And he just has this twinkle in his eye, kind of like a childlike mischief, that he's kind of her foil, right? She's kind of dry and witty, and he's just as witty, but in a softer, more vulnerable and sweet way.
Can I just compare here briefly another couple that just sprung to mind with the way you were describing Uncle Lucas and Dorothy? And I know this is a stretch, but if Dorothy was David and Uncle Lucas was Patrick, like there's just something about they each have wittiness, but in their own way, and how, Dorothy sort of set in her ways the same way David is, and someone who knows how to play off of that and make light of it and make it like a joyful thing.
Similar to the David and Patrick thing.
If anyone is wondering to themselves, who are David and Patrick? I just thought I'd interject here to explain those are two characters from Schitt's Creek. Sometimes Katie and I do this. It's a twin thing.
We love Patrick because he's so sweet to David's acid, but Patrick can dish it back to David in a way that nobody else can, which is kind of the way that we see this here too. Leslie knows how to play off her. He's a willing partner in repartee.
So they've got a plot to play against Blanche. And how does that turn out?
Okay, so the next morning we have the living room. They're all gathered. And one thing I really didn't like throughout this episode, but it's really pronounced here, is I don't know what they put in the water while the studio audience was waiting for this episode to begin. But it seems to me like everyone's about 7 drinks in. There is cheering, there is clapping, there are long pauses while the audience just can't get over themselves.
It's kind of like on So You Think You Can Dance, where the audience is wooting and hollering throughout the entire performance, and it kind of ruins the performance.
Yeah, basically, we're watching a scene where the audience are preteen girls at an NSYNC concert in 1990-something. So Lucas arrives after Dorothy has described how wonderful their date was. He's got flowers. Blanche thinks they're for her, but no, they're for Dorothy. And he wastes no time. He just gets right into it. And bam, here we have the proposal. She accepts. There is dramatic flinging of kisses, etc. They're really hamming this up so that they can sell the product that they're trying to Blanche. One thing that I read, there's kind of a well-known controversy between B. Arthur and Betty White. B. Arthur apparently had some sort of grudge against Betty White. No one really knows why.
Oh, I thought the reason why was that Betty White won the first Emmy and B. Arthur couldn't stand it.
I agree. I also think that just in general, they were similar to their characters, and that B was a very acerbic sort of dry person, and Betty was just, a puppy dog. She was just, a ball of joy. B. Arthur was kind of from the New York group of actors and was more into stage acting, and she never broke the fourth wall. Whereas Betty was, decades just born and bred TV, and she knew how to sell something to a TV audience, which did sometimes mean kind of hamming up, wink, wink to the audience. And B apparently didn't like that style. So that's one other thing between them that apparently might have pushed B to be kind of curmudgeon-y about Betty White. But in this scene, she's breaking the fourth wall. There's, it's almost one of those annoying things where she does a punchline and the camera literally like zooms into her before she says it. And then she's like looking at the camera almost when she says it. She does a double take, then she does a triple take. It's almost just like she's like a pitcher on the mound looking over her shoulder at the first baseman to see if he'll steal. I mean, she's just really overdoing it. So at one point, she and Lucas are doing Eskimo kisses, which is already pretty over the top. And then she yells out, "Ears now." And Abby, they start rubbing ears together. I mean, it's just so corny and weird.
But also, this is Dorothy trying to act. So in my mind, it's not B. Arthur, making a scene realistic in her New York way. It's, Dorothy Zbornak, a substitute teacher, trying to act in love over the top. So, it makes sense. It's someone who's a terrible actor trying to act something ridiculous.
That's true. I guess it's just one of those things where I've already sat and listened to the audience literally cheer for 11 seconds. And we've already had Blanche overdoing it. And there's just so much more subtle comedy that they did over the series. And there are other parts of this episode that I did like, but this scene really just kind of turned me off.
So their fake romance is not hitting home with you. Sounds like Blanche and Rose are buying it.
Yes, they are. So now we're in the kitchen. It's night. And Rose is upset because she's going to be the only unrelated Golden Girl. Meanwhile, Blanche is upset that a Yankee will be living in her familial mansion, Hollingsworth. But then outside, we get Lucas dropping off Dorothy. So he was in town for a hardware conference, and he has taken her along so they can keep up this ruse of them being in love. But then again, oh man, Leslie Nielsen's so good. Just gives her this soft little peck or whatever. And then he walks off, and the look on his face when he's walking off, like, oh man, this guy is good.
It sounds like in the very last episode of The Golden Girls, they found their fifth Beatle.
I have never been so impressed by Leslie Nielsen.
Well, they had to go big. He's a big get for the end of this show. He was huge at the time.
He was so well known for not this. Oh, he was just such a revelation to me. Okay, so the next night, Dorothy and Lucas come in from the lanai where they have been. And then this is where Abby, all I can say is Sophia enters from the kitchen, and she is wearing a full-on mammy outfit, as in hair kerchief, apron. She's dressed like an enslaved woman mammy. Not only is she dressed like that, she is speaking in a dialect that gives you that impression. She is not wearing blackface, but she might as well be, because it is a horrifying impersonation. She is doing this because Blanche has placed this doubt in her mind that Dorothy is not going to take her with her to Hollingsworth Manor and is going to abandon her. So she's trying to find a spot for herself or make herself useful so that Dorothy will take her along when she gets married.
Yikes. That sounds pretty awful. And now I'm kind of glad I didn't see this part of the episode.
Yeah. Best left really on the cutting room floor. Alas, it has not been cut from this episode. So then Rose enters and tells everyone that she feels like they're breaking up as a family and she's going to move out and go live with her daughter. And it's at this point that Rue breaks down, has a hissy fit, storms off. She tells Dorothy, "You are destroying the family and I'm going to be all alone." She breaks down and she leaves. While this scene obviously has problems in the Sophia department, I did like the message of this in that these women have built a family. And I just love that that's what they call each other. They call each other the family. Now, Lucas and Dorothy are feeling terrible. And once everyone else leaves them alone, they start to plan that they're going to have a breakup scene during dinner. But then as Leslie is talking about it, and at this point, Blanche starts to come in to say something else, but pauses when she sees that more discussion is happening. Uncle Lucas tells Dorothy how hard it's going to be for him to break up with her because he's been having such a great time with her over the past couple of days. And so then everybody kind of enters back in, and Rue makes another big speech. And she tells them, "I see two people who have been afraid to reach out and to take that first step towards real feeling. And you guys have found that, and I'm not going to oppose this union." And so, of course, Lucas and Dorothy are feeling really guilty now. Lucas starts to tell Blanche the truth, but right when he gets to the point where he's going to come out with it, he can't do it. And instead, he proposes to Dorothy again. When Dorothy is surprised and she says, "For real?" and he just whispers, "For real." By this point, we all want Leslie Nielsen to be our husbands, and then we get our to be continued.
Ah, a cliffhanger. Well, I love that there is some real emotion in there, and I do think that's what the Golden Girls did so well. Yeah, so let's find out how it turns out in part 2 of the finale. So there is a little title card that says that it's now 2 months later. So they've had a little engagement process. And we've got Leslie and Dorothy entering the living room and sharing sort of a stolen kiss because they're talking about how they've been so busy. They've just not had a chance to be alone together. And Sophia pops up from behind the couch and takes a Polaroid of them smooching. Which becomes a thing throughout the whole episode. So they do confirm that the plan is now set for Sophia to move to Atlanta with them and out of Blanche's home. Blanche and Rose enter, and there's some sort of awkward attempts to say something. It's the last night before the wedding, and the two friends of Dorothy clearly want to have a moment and sort of acknowledge this big transition that's about to happen the next day. Dorothy's very not wanting to get emotional. They do sort of dig a little bit about how the sex is going with Uncle Lucas. And Dorothy has one of those moments where she's so reserved and contained about these things, but she ends up screaming that it was so good they named it.
Now, by naming it, do you mean naming it?
Oh yeah, that's what she says. They named the sex. It was so good. All right, so it's now sort of later at night, and Rose is out on the lanai. And I will say, I'm glad we have one last lanai scene. Blanche enters, and both of them admit they can't sleep because, of what's happening the next day. And of course, as they sort of embrace one another with their sadness, Sophia jumps out and takes a Polaroid of them. The three of them end up sort of sitting at the table around there, which is interesting because I've always sort of felt like usually it's Dorothy, Blanche, Rose gathered around the kitchen table. In fact, in my kitchen for the longest time, we have 5 family members. We have a table with 4 chairs, and we have what we call the Sophia stool in our kitchen because inevitably Sophia would perch on one of those stools and drag it over the table, but she would never sit in the 4th chair to obviously not mess up the cameras. But even so, we always call our stool in our kitchen the Sophia stool because there aren't enough chairs for everybody. All right. Well, in this scene, as I said, we've got the 3 chairs, but they're being filled by now Blanche and Rose and Sophia in the center chair that is usually in the kitchen held by Dorothy. So the 3 of them are talking about their plans. When they start talking, Sophia especially encourages Blanche and Rose to stay together. And she tells them, this is your family now and how they need each other. So when you were talking about that reiteration of that idea of family in the first episode, it's definitely continuing into this one. And I just find Sophia once more kind of guiding them as if they're her girls. So the Blanche and Rose head off to bed feeling better about this decision. And it's really interesting because Sophia kind of lingers at the table and says, goodbye, my girls. And she looks after them wistfully at this little Polaroid she's taken of the 2 of them. All right. Lights up on wedding day. We see a fancy limo driving down a street with palm trees. Dorothy is sort of ruminating to herself about what a kind gift of, Lucas to send a limo to bring her to the church, and what a thoughtful person he is and how great. Well, then the limo pulls over to the side of the road, and it turns out that Stanley is the limo driver.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
So he rolls down the window, separating himself from her, because she's like, driver, why are you pulling over? It turns out he has ordered this limo. So she thinks, she's being kidnapped, so she can't make it to her own wedding. But it's another scene between the 2 of them where he just sort of apologizes and tells her how much he really does love her and how happy for her he is and how she really does deserve all this, and giving his blessing in a way.
Oh, I love that.
People love Stanley episodes, and often I'm on Team Dorothy with this. I just really find him so annoying. But I really enjoyed the 2 of them. Again, the silliness is sort of set aside and there's some real sentiment there.
I'm glad that I need to go watch this scene because you never really understand what she ever really saw in him and why she would have been married to him for so long.
Oh, she was pregnant at the altar. That's why.
Well, I know, but then she stayed with him for 40 years.
All right. So Dorothy is not kidnapped. Stanley does take her all the way to the church. And this is another interesting scene. The entire wedding is done in voiceover. So we're getting the internal thoughts of Dorothy and Sophia as Sophia is walking Dorothy up the aisle. Dorothy is, thinking about, everyone's looking at her and she's really enjoying having all the attention. Sophia is thinking about how she thinks she might be about to cry and she's getting her hanky ready, but then nope, she sneezes, no tears. She isn't that touched. And then Blanche is ruminating about how everyone's looking at Dorothy and how Dorothy looks so beautiful and how she can't believe she's jealous of Dorothy. And if she's this jealous of Dorothy, what must Rose be thinking? And of course, Rose is not thinking. She's singing The Farmer in the Dell in her mind.
You've got to be kidding me. Oh my gosh.
All right. And then back to Dorothy, who's thinking how amazing Lucas is and how he's so, in tune with her that he can probably hear every word she's thinking. And then he, of course, is thinking, yes, I can, Dorothy, I can. So there's these little ridiculous voiceovers. And then the preacher enters and we hear his internal positive self-talk about how these people are going to love him. He's going to do he's a wonderful preacher. He's just pumping himself up to give the ceremony here. So then we just get the traditional wedding scene. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, a wedding is a wedding. It's exciting when it's characters you know. I do find it's a little less exciting. I know we love Leslie Nielsen. I'm not saying anything's wrong, but I'm just saying as a viewer, like when Dwayne Wayne and Whitley get married on A Different World, a couple like that, or when Jim and Pam get married on The Office, when it's a couple you've invested seasons of your time with, I feel like there's a little bit more excitement and emotion than, even though we love Leslie Nielsen, we've seen him for 2 episodes.
Oh, absolutely. We've only had 22 minutes with Leslie Nielsen. I mean, maybe 30 by the time we're at this scene. So yes, I completely see what you're saying.
So that's what I'm saying. It's a wedding scene. The preacher does the ceremony. Dorothy calls out, yes, a little too early. The preacher, asks Uncle Lucas to repeat after him. And of course, Rose repeats everything he says. Stanley.
Oh my God, Stan is still there. He didn't just, okay.
No,
sorry,
we see him
going.
in the background. It's very subtle. We see him sort of squeeze into a pew at the very back. We hear the traditional, if there are any objections, and there's sort of a cut to Stanley and he kind of smiles, a little bittersweetly, but nothing happens. And then Sophia thinks she's about to sneeze, but the sneeze turns to tears and she's truly touched by the whole thing.
Oh, yay. Yes, Sophia. Cry.
So now we've got Dorothy in her room. It's all packed up. She's sort of putting a few last things into some boxes. And Sophia enters and announces that she's decided she's staying and she's not going to go with Dorothy. And there's a really touching, scene between the two of them where she talks about how it's been an honor not just to be her mom, but to, as adults, have become true friends. And as, friends, this is the right thing to do.
Oh my gosh, I would be a puddle on the floor at this point.
Yes. All right. Uncle Lucas arrived to whisk Dorothy away to the airport. He reveals that he and Freddie Peterson are ready. Blanche and Rose are like, who's Freddie Peterson? And Leslie reveals, oh, that's the name of the sex.
Okay, so who is Freddie? Oh my gosh, we have to find out who this is.
I'm sure Freddie Peterson is someone. But here's part of the joke. So then Dorothy enters, and of course he's like, ready, Dorothy? And she's like, ready, Freddie. And, everyone knows the joke, so they're all laughing, but she didn't know that everyone knew. Now, Leslie heads out to wait for her in the car to the airport. So now it's really the goodbye time.
Are they crying? Are the actresses crying?
Yeah, they're gearing up for this tearful group hug. It's definitely Dorothy's moment. I think I'll play for you what she says if I can find it.
It's been it's been an experience that I'll always keep very close to my heart. And that these are memories that I'll wrap myself in when the world gets cold and I forget that there are people who are warm and loving and...
We love you too.
It's a very heartfelt speech. The other 3 are crushed. And then...
Oh God, I love you so much.
She lets go of the embrace and again talks about how...
You're angels. All of you.
She sadly exits again. And there's that long pause and they all stare at the door just to see if she might re-enter one more time. And she doesn't come back through the door. And all of a sudden she re-enters through the lanai and they all hug and they're cheering and they're so happy to see Dorothy. Again, the hug subsides.
You'll always be my sisters. Always.
It's amazing to me, some of the storylines or jokes that they've done on this show, because you always think to yourself, as you go back in history, how more, things were less sexually explicit, things were more prudish, old women were supposed to be not sexually active, and there's a whole bunch of sex jokes. They just covered all these topics that were taboo, or topics like AIDS and deportation and all sorts of things, and is something that we don't talk about but should and do more now.
Absolutely. But now we have to discuss, is this final episode, the series finale, truly the best episode of The Golden Girls? Because according to IMDb voters, it has the number one slot. It gets a 9.2. No other episode gets a 9.2. I'm going to weigh in and say, no, I do not believe this should have top billing as the best episode in the series. I think it's strong in moments. I think it's weaker in others. I think it does not deliver on the classic character jokes that, to me, make the show so memorable. So I'm going to go with no. I don't think this is the best episode of The Golden Girls.
When you told me what the best episode was of this series, I went into it thinking there's no way in heck I'm going to think this is the best. And the reason why I say that is that many years ago, when our cat died, he was your cat as a kid, and then I sort of took over the cats when we got older. When our sweet little Sam cat died, I went into kind of meltdown territory, because he was the first family pet that passed away. And all I would do to get through it is I would come home from work every night. I would sit down, I would just watch Golden Girls one episode after the next. That's literally what helped me grieve through his death. But once I hit, I'm going to say season 6, because I was watching them all in order, I started to notice things about the show that made it less of a warm cup of tea for me. And one of the things that I noticed is that, again, as characters get more exaggerated and the writing isn't as maybe creative as it once was, they started using crutches. And one of the crutches that I really didn't like about the show is they would put each other down. I mean, let's face it, Rose is essentially a punching bag for her lack of wit. Dorothy is always picked on for, not being dateable or whatever, really into men or successful in the dating department. But it just got mean. In the first many seasons, they were so creative in their put downs, and it was so hilarious that you kind of went with it, and even they were kind of in on the joke. Blanche is always laughing at the jokes about her sexuality, and quote unquote they call her a slut all the time, and she just thinks it's hilarious. Just in season 6 and 7, it wasn't creative anymore. It was just down and out mean. So I thought it was going to be not good at all, and I can see why it has such a high rating. I agree with you. It is not my favorite episode. I don't think it's the best episode. I think for sentimental reasons, people voted it up as they did, but it was way better than I thought it was going to be.
I will say I do think the show went out when it was on top, because when I was looking over, well, what do I think are some of the best episodes? I actually was surprised that I found a number of memorable ones in season 7, which I thought was a surprise. So one I will mention is there's an episode, it's episode 8 of season 7 called Monkey Show. It's a 2-parter. This is the one where Dorothy's sister Gloria is coming. And there's always this tension because she's clearly the favorite daughter of Sophia, and Dorothy's sort of the second favorite daughter. And also Stan and Dorothy, but he's got like this fake monkey that he carries around because they're doing therapy, and he's so reliant on Dorothy, even though they're not married anymore. And it's something about how he's supposed to be reliant on this monkey he carries around now. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, and you're probably like, oh, please. This is the epitome of jumping the shark.
You cannot see me, but I am rolling my eyes right now.
But I do love the actress who comes as Gloria. I believe she's been on the show before as Gloria.
I remember that actress. She is good.
And in this episode, she's always been kind of rich and looking down on Dorothy. And apparently she had like lost all her money in some scheme or something. But of course, Dorothy is ready to like knock her down a peg because finally she's like fallen off the pedestal, and Dorothy is loving it. So I love seeing Dorothy be vindictive in this way towards someone who isn't Blanche or Rose. And of course, then the nail gets driven even in further when Gloria and Stanley sleep together in Dorothy's bed.
I think I remember this.
It reminds me of a Frasier episode in that it's sort of stagey and ridiculous and delicious and fun, because simultaneous to this plot line, Blanche and Rose are running a telethon to save a beloved lighthouse on the shores of Miami. And meanwhile, Sophia's plot line is that she's insistent that there's a hurricane a-coming. And nowhere in the weather does it say this is happening, but she's old, she can feel it in her bones. I just love it when we get something like a telethon that the girls have to participate in.
Oh, that's the show at its best, when they have to do something absolutely ridiculous, but it's for one of the girls, so they all do it.
So then, of course, a hurricane does hit. All the people they hired to be on the telethon aren't coming. Blanche and Rose trying to fill airtime.
Wait a minute. And this is the same episode with the sister. This is crazy.
Yes, this is a two-parter, which is why all this stuff is able to happen simultaneously. So, of course, they all end up at the telethon because now the telethon is off and it's a hurricane shelter. And of course, the lighthouse they were trying to save has been destroyed by the hurricane. So there's no point in doing the telethon anymore anyway. So I totally agree with what you're saying about the trajectory of the show, but there are some gems. And when I was looking through the entire 7th season, there were 3 or 4 episodes that I remember vividly as being good ones.
Because the one that stands out to my mind is the murder mystery, where they go away for that murder mystery weekend. That's a season 7er.
Oh, yes. So I actually believe that is the that's number 2, according to IMDb. Another one of my favorites, this is in the beginning of the 5th season. This is my proposal.
Wait a minute. This is it? This is your counter? Okay. Sorry. I'm ready.
It's the season opener of season 5. It's called Sick and Tired. And is this the one you picked too?
Keep going. I have something to say about this episode.
Okay.
Keep going.
Dorothy has this horrible set of symptoms, but she can't describe it. And every doctor just sends her to another doctor and can't find anything wrong with her. And, is doing what I'm sure any woman listening to this has experienced, where something's wrong and you're expressing that to professionals and they don't believe you. And it's how frustrating that is. And we know how smart and diligent Dorothy is a character, as are all women who are ready to advocate for themselves. And you really see, especially Sophia, distressed for her daughter to be in this situation. So again, that's the serious plot line going on. And I think it's an amazing plot line. I know it was pulled from Susan Harris, the creator's real life, but it also has the most hilarious B plot line ever. I think Rue is probably my favorite Golden Girl. And in this set of episodes, she decides she's going to write an amazing American novel. And she stays up all night. And so she's just beyond exhaustion in the morning. I will play a clip.
My brain's gone. My body is limp with exhaustion. I suppose all the greats knew this feeling. And the thing is, after all this, I've decided not to sell my book. It's too good to sell. They can publish it after I'm dead, like Vincent van Gogh.
Van Gogh was a painter, Blanche.
Whatever, it's all the same thing. We're all artists, we're all misunderstood. He cut off his hair, maybe I'll cut off mine.
He cut off his ear.
I have too many earrings.
So yes, I officially submit this because, again, amazing plots for every character and a really important central story being told. That's my pick for the best episode.
Okay, so one of the things that I did, because not only do I have a favorite episode, but I have specific scenes that are my favorite for each character. The episode that you chose is not my favorite episode, but it is the best Dorothy moment in the entire series in my mind. Dorothy is the Golden Girl that's strong. She's the Golden Girl that you want in your corner if you're going to go up for a fight. At the end of this episode, in part 2, she has a short but so powerful monologue. She's at dinner with the rest of the women, and she sees this doctor who has dismissed her eating supper with his wife. And she decides she's going to go over because she's now figured out what her diagnosis is. As you mentioned, it's chronic fatigue syndrome. And she goes up to him and she just tells him,
Dr. Bud, I came to you sick and scared, and you dismissed me. You didn't have the answer, and instead of saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, you made me feel crazy, like I had made it all up. You dismissed me. You made me feel like a child, a fool, a neurotic who was wasting your precious time. Is that your caring profession? Is that healing? No one deserves that kind of treatment, Dr. Bud. No one. I suspect had I been a man, I might have been taken a little bit more seriously and not told to go to a hairdresser.
Look, I am not going to sit here anymore.
Shut up, Louis.
I don't know where you doctors lose your humanity, but you lose it. You know, if all of you at the beginning of your careers could get very sick and very scared for a while, you'd probably learn more from that than anything else. You'd better start listening to your patients. They need to be heard. They need caring. They need compassion. They need attending to. You know, someday, Dr. Bud, you're going to be on the other side of the table. And as angry as I am, and as angry as I always will be, I still wish you a better doctor than you were to me.
You know what I found so interesting is when I looked for this clip on YouTube, there's a medical activism community, sort of nonprofit group, and they use this clip as part of their marketing, which I thought was so cool.
It should be required viewing for every medical school.
You know, I actually dove as well, trying to find if each actress had a favorite episode. And 2 of the 4 did go public with their favorite episodes. So Betty White's favorite episode is called A Little Romance. It was season 1, episode 13. This is the episode where she starts dating a guy that she's very enthusiastic about, but she's kind of shy about letting the other women meet him. And it turns out that he's a little person. And what Betty said about the show is that she thought it was so funny and that it was never insulting. The jokes that they did were comedic, and the fact that he was so good at reparteeing with them and kind of giving as good as he got was something that she really enjoyed. Rue, her favorite episode was season 7, episode 19. It's called Journey to the Center of Attention, where she has a pickup bar where she picks up men. It's called the Rusty Anchor. And somehow Dorothy ends up coming to this bar and she is hitting it off with these men way more than Blanche is. So Blanche tries to one-up Dorothy and does this highly choreographed piano singing routine where she's on the piano. She even made the production hire a choreographer to make this the most over-the-top I'm singing on top of a piano scene ever, and it's hilarious. But getting into my favorite Blanche scene comes at the very end of an episode called And Then There Was One. It's season 2, episode 16, and this is a telephone scene, and you only get one end of the conversation. You get Blanche's end of the conversation. Blanche, who doesn't have a great relationship with her daughter Janet, kind of gets the courage through all that's happening around in the house to phone her daughter Janet and just try to make that mother-daughter connection with her daughter.
I could just sneak away for a few days and come see you. Middle of next week, maybe. Oh. No, I understand. How about the next week? Oh. Uh-huh. Well, then you pick a time. Well, honey, I really do want to see you. I think we have a lot to talk about, Janet. I've been thinking a lot about you lately. You mean this coming weekend? Well, sure I can. All right. All right, I'll see you then. Janet, I love you, baby. Bye-bye.
And then similarly, my favorite scene from Rose is in season 2. It's the last episode of the season. It's called A Piece of Cake. And this is one where they're all, in the kitchen at night. Sophia's making a cake and they're just all talking about cakes. And Rose has a memory of her very last cake in St. Olaf. So we see her, she's in her kitchen in St. Olaf. She's finishing this cake. She's putting it on the table. Then she leaves, comes back in yawning and pretending that this is a surprise birthday cake from her now dead husband, Charlie. And she talks to Charlie like he's an imaginary friend. And she sits down with him and she tells him that she's made this big decision and she wanted to break it to him on her birthday so he won't be mad at her, but she's going to sell the house. She's going to move to Miami. She just misses him too badly to stay in this house full of memories, and the children have all moved out and she needs to sort of start her life over again.
I hope to be in Florida before the next winter comes. But I know that wherever I am, you'll be right there with me. I love you, Charlie. I miss you. It's my birthday. You know the rules. I get the rose.
I definitely remember that scene. I find it really poignant that what you're really connecting with here is what we talked about before, those really more heartfelt moments that really show them as human beings and not this sort of witty repartee that we know and love so much. Can I just say my favorite, hilarious Rose scene?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So actually, IMDB also highly rates this one. They say that this episode, it's season 3, episode 1, it's called Old Friends. And it is a great episode because of the Sophia A storyline about befriending a man who has Alzheimer's at the beach. That's the great A story. But Rose has the best hilarious B story where Blanche accidentally gives her teddy bear away to a sunshine cadet during a rummage sale and tries to get it back. But this little sunshine cadet, who's a clear stand-in for a Girl Scout girl, is evil and refuses to give the teddy bear back. And Blanche and Dorothy end up trying all sorts of crazy ways to get the teddy bear back. And it ends up being Rose using her own seemingly sweet wiles and getting that darn teddy bear back in a pretty cruel way, but it's very satisfying. All right, so that's Rose. So what have you got for Sophia?
Okay, let's face it. Sophia has the best barbs on the show. She gets a lot of zinger lines. But this is one from season 1, episode 6. It's called On Golden Girls. It has a pretty serious A line, but basically a family member comes to visit and Dorothy and Sophia have to end up sharing a bed. And I just remember watching this in our basement den, you and me. And we normally watched a heck of a lot of TV, but this is one where our mom wandered down. I don't know if she was going to come get us for something or whatever, but she happened to be there when this scene was happening. And it was just something where all 3 of us got into a giggle loop and we just could not stop laughing. It is totally inane joke. So like I said, Dorothy and Sophia have to share a bed. And the next morning, Sophia is complaining about how she couldn't get any sleep because Dorothy snores. And Dorothy says, "Ma, I do not snore." And Sophia says, "Please, I had to roll you over so you wouldn't inhale the drapes." Again, probably not funny in the retelling, but I've lost it with you a million times where we just laughed over really stupid stuff. But the fact that our mom was nearly on the floor with us laughing over this ridiculous joke is why that's my favorite Sophia scene.
Aw, that's awesome. Yes. Well, as we all know, the ladies in bed together in various combinations can make for some hilarious times. I'm betting I can guess your favorite all of them together scene because it's probably mine too.
Okay, yes, it is. I'm sure it's the same. It's from Bedtime Story, season 2.
Episode 17.
Now, this is not my favorite episode, but it's hands down the best scene in the show. It's got all 4 women. There's a cold snap in Miami. How believable is that? And Sophia is the only one with an electric blanket. So first, Dorothy shows up. Abby, do you want to take it away?
I mean, I don't know that we can fully capture the hilarious, but it's 3 minutes of comic genius as first Dorothy, then Blanche shows up, then Rose is the one who's been trying to work on the heater shows up. And it's just these wildly different women horribly clashing in this bed.
Which is ridiculously small, and they are crammed in like sardines. Oh, and then at one point, Blanche says, listen, did you all hear that sound? And Sophia says, yeah, and as long as I'm in my own bed, I'll do what I want.
It's comedy gold. So I agree. That is the best scene overall ever from any episode of the Golden Girls, of the four of them together. Let's hear it. What is your claim on the best full episode of the Golden Girls?
My favorite episode is Grab That Dough, which is an episode where Sophia has managed to get them on their all of their favorite game show. Unfortunately, she misaddressed who the ticket should be sent to. So they need to get to LA for the taping in one day. So they hop on a red eye. They show up at a hotel that has just given away their room. Their purses get stolen. Finally, they get to this game show. It has the most hilarious host who is so enamored of himself. It's just great. And he thinks they're all ridiculous. And it's just one of those crazy fun, we're all doing ridiculous things episodes where they go on an adventure and hilarity ensues.
I'm interested to see that your final pick was going balls to the walls with the comedy, but I love it.
I can love the scenes because they make me cry, but when you're doing a show like this and the zingers are great, every little detail is pure gold on this one.
Oh, I love it. All right, so there you have it. My pick for the best episode ever of the Golden Girls is season 5, episodes 1 and 2. It's called Sick and Tired. And Kate,
my nomination is Grab That Dough. It is season 3, episode 16.
All right. So does IMDb currently have it correct? Or do you have another episode that you think is the very best? And if so, head over to IMDb and start rating them 10 and getting them moving up those charts on the Golden Girls page.
I have an idea for next week. So Dorothy meets her match in Leslie Nielsen's Uncle Lucas, and her acerbic wit is met with his sweet, subtle repartee. And you happened to mention that one of the best couples that exemplifies this is David and Patrick on Schitt's Creek. So I'm wondering if maybe we should do that next.
Yeah, I'm in. Let's do Schitt's Creek next week.
All right, it's a deal.
All right. I will see you then.